If you've been taking your training seriously for even just a short period of time, the probability is high that somebody at some point has inquired as to how much you bench. The reality is that the bench press itself is a relatable lift. A lot of people have tried it, or at the very least understand that that exercise itself, which is one they recognize, is quite challenging with significant loads. But today, we're going to be covering the bases on a question that arguably is more important and will likely contribute to setting the foundation to you being able to bench even more respectable weights in the future. And that question is, how well do you bench? So without further ado, we're going to get under the bar and go over the basics to set the foundation for a solid bench press. So first and foremost, we want to set up 5 points of contact, and we'll likely have to adjust our position slightly as we move forward, but we want to start with this in mind. You might not be able to see that well from this angle, but I'll let you know that the first 2 are going to be your right and left foot respectively. They should be in contact with the floor from the heel through to the toe. From there, we're going to roll back underneath the bar itself. The next point of contact will be the bum, the upper back, and the back of your head. The idea is to maintain those 5 points of contact throughout each repetition and the consequent set. Now, once you're laying down on the bench, as so, we have to make sure that you're positioned properly. There's a few mistakes that people make here. The first is being too far back behind the bar. This creates an issue because as you bench, you run the risk of hitting your own J-hook. This not only is extremely frustrating, but can increase the risk of injury under heavy load. We also want to make sure, as I readjust for a brief moment, that we're not too far away from the bar either. The reason why is because it's going to put unnecessary stress on the shoulders as we try to unrack it from far behind us. So what is the optimal position? In order to set up, what I suggest is shimmying yourself just slightly, so much so that your eyes are directly underneath the bar itself. This is going to ensure that when the bar is positioned at the end of the J-hooks, as it is here, that when it's unracked, you're not putting unnecessary stress on your shoulders in order to get it off of the J-hooks. As well, when you're following the proper bar path during the press itself, you won't run the risk of smashing into the undercarriage of those J-hooks. Now let's talk grip position. Where exactly do you want to grab the bar? Because you've likely seen people bench pressing super wide out here, but you've also probably seen people taking even ultra close grips inside the knurling itself. So what's right? Well, it depends on the exact press variation that you might be working with on an individual basis. But for the sake of today's video, we're going to talk just a basic barbell bench with no specific variations being employed. What you're going to want to do is set up your hand placement so much so that when you unrack the bar and press at the bottom of the range of motion, your forearms are vertical, up and down. They're not out too wide to the sides, and they're not angled inwards towards the torso itself. This is important because we want to make sure that we're not creating a moment arm relative to the elbow. This, of course, will result in more force having to be applied against the bar to move the same amount of weight. So here's an example of what an optimal vertical forearm position looks like on the bench press. As you can see, the forearms are straight up and down, compared to a much wider grip placement that is often employed, in which the forearms are angled out slightly, so much so as to create a moment arm, which will result in more effort required in order to move a comparable load. So when grabbing the bar itself, what we want to be aware of is the position of the barbell in the palm. This is an issue a lot of people run into because they allow the bar to roll back just like this. Now, as you can see, the bar itself is now behind the wrist. This too creates a moment arm. That means that instead of the force being transmitted directly through the upper limb, through the wrist into the bar, it now has a moment arm present that will require more effort in order to move the same amount of weight. We want to make sure that bar is directly over the wrist. So in this exact position, by squeezing the bar as tight as possible, it engages the flexor and extensor group of the forearms, pulling that bar back directly over top of the forearm itself. This eliminates that moment arm and puts the bar in an optimal position. We want to make sure that that position is held right from the initiation of grabbing the bar itself. It often proves beneficial when grabbing the bar to ensure that you visualize progressive cues. One of those cues is to try and disintegrate or melt the bar. The other is to try and squeeze the bar until your knuckles change colors. Both of these cues are going to encourage you to squeeze the bar harder, engaging the flexor and extensor groups of the forearm, which are going to help maintain that bar over the forearms directly. As well, when grabbing the bar and squeezing, we want to make sure that internal rotation of the shoulders is present. This is going to maximize torque and consequent stability through the shoulders. As soon as that grip is placed, you will press the bar straight up and out over the chest. Now that we have the bar positioned over top of the chest, now we want to make sure that we're pressing the bar through a proper range of motion. What I always encourage people to do is look at the ceiling instead of at the bar itself. The reason why is because the ceiling will not move. So look straight up at the ceiling, which is going to stay in one place the entire time, and make sure in your line of sight you're aware of the position of the barbell relative to the ceiling. The reason why this is important is because as you press the barbell, you want to make sure that it's returning to that same point that you initially saw at lockout. It becomes an issue when you focus on the barbell itself with your eyes because the barbell is moving, and it will become more challenging for you to maintain an optimal bar path as you try and redirect a moving target back to an initial position that you can't maintain a visual on. While maintaining eye contact with the ceiling itself, not only is it important to ensure that the bar finishes where it started, but we also want to prioritize bringing the bar down to the proper position in the chest. Ideally, that'll be midpoint on the sternum. In order to do that, you're going to break at the elbows, allowing the elbows to come forward slightly. Now, the best way to maximize this is to ensure that you're focusing on that internal rotation, almost trying to bend the bar forward in front of you. As you'll be able to see in a brief moment, this should impact the slight direction that the elbows are pointing in. If I don't focus on internal rotation, obviously being dramatic, my elbows often flare out to the sides. Yes, I'm exaggerating slightly. By forcing internal rotation, you probably just noticed that my elbows turned. And as I break at the elbows now, they angle forward slightly, allowing me to come right down to the midpoint of the sternum with ease, pressing back up to a full extension while maintaining that eye contact with the ceiling to ensure that I'm returning the bar to its original point instead of trying to focus on the bar itself, resulting in me coming out of the groove relative to an optimal bar path. To conclude, once you're done with that rep or an entire set, you're going to push the bar with control back into the J-hooks, and then control it down. A common mistake that's often made when people are trying to put the barbell back into the J-hooks is as they're laying on the bench, they're trying to angle one side in and then the other side in, and this often results in them missing one side and potentially dropping the bar on themselves and getting injured. Remember, you're not going to be able to go past the back of the rack, regardless of what type of bench press you might be working on. Understanding that, it makes more sense to control the bar straight back until contact is made with the back plate of the J-hooks themselves or the rack that you might be working on, and then under control, lower it down into the J-hook itself. Whether this video helped you with your entire bench press setup or it simply brought to light a few points of clarification that you needed to tighten up the slack, or further, if it was a good refresher for you, I encourage you to follow or subscribe depending on what social media platform you might be seeing this on. And as per usual, if you happen to have any specific topics relative to training, nutrition, lifestyle that you'd like to see me cover in an upcoming video, then make sure either leave a comment or send me a DM. And if I'm able to, I'll make sure that it's covered.